I've been working on helping businesses improve their customer experience and the conversion rates for well over 20 years now. Kind of freaks me out when I think about it. And it's funny because every single time I go to a conference, I always get somebody who comes up to me and asks me, hey, you know, you've learned so much, you've worked with companies, everything from the Overstocks to Google to Marketo to GE to on and on, right? And to small businesses, what's the secret? What's the secret? And it's a question that drove my brother and I crazy, actually, the last couple of years. We were actually working for Google, and we were helping them get a ridiculous optimization number. I can't even talk about it, how crazy it was. You won't believe me anyway. Even I'm a New Yorker, you're not going to believe me. And what ended up happening was we realized that there was one thing, truly one thing, that made the difference between every successful client versus everyone else. And my brother and I have always felt very guilty. So we were the first agency ever to focus in on conversion rates. We started our agency to focus on conversion rates in 1998. So if you remember back then, I don't know, how many of you were marketing online in 1998? Just curious. We've got a couple of old-timers here. It was all about the .com and the new economy and sock puppets and, I mean, just crazy models. And nobody thought about sales. And here we were saying, hey, you know, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to do. And we went ahead and we've worked with companies like Overstock where we changed one graphic and it accounted for a $25 million lift, right? Back then, you just show somebody that there was an add to cart button and you'd lift conversion rates. I mean, things were really that bad. We left the agency world about 6 years ago, and I'm very grateful for that. And we just started working a little bit on our own, and we were called in by Google, and they started asking us. And this process, Buyer Legends, came out of that engagement. And I'm not going to tell you a lot about it right now, but I want to share with you two stories. So sometimes I'm not very smart, probably more often than I can admit, and my son's in the front row, so I better be careful of what I say. And I went ahead and I had a new MacBook Pro, and I needed a new backup drive. And I ended up ordering the wrong one, with the wrong cable, right? So I had to ship it back. Of course, you go on Amazon to return something, no problem, you get the shipping label. And I'm sitting with the label, and I work from home, so you can imagine for me to get out to return something is actually quite a big deal. So it sits in my office for about 3 weeks. Finally, I put the label on, I take it to the UPS store, it scans in. That afternoon, I had credit on my credit card for the return. And I'm like, that's never happened to me. Has it ever happened to you before? Now, how many of you have ever tried to return something to Amazon, they tell you, don't worry about it, keep it, right? We've all heard tons of these stories. And I was like, that was pretty amazing. And it's like, no one's ever returned something until they got it, until they processed it, right, days later. And here they were, the afternoon it went into the UPS system. They were giving me credit. I said, that was pretty cool. Okay. Now, let me tell you a second story. So a few weeks ago, I went with my son and my daughter. We went to visit my mom in Brooklyn. And I've got a little one at home, six years old, and I've got a 14-year-old daughter. And he's infatuated with Lego, like what 6-year-old is not, right? And so we decided to ship back all the old Legos my brother and I used to play with. Big box. And so my mom had it already in a nice little box for us. And we go ahead, and right near her is a Staples. Right? There isn't a UPS store right nearby her, but there's a Staples. And I know Staples is also UPS and FedEx and USPS shipping center. And I figure, okay, how hard can it be if I take the box, I can go and I can figure out how to get it shipped there. So I go ahead and I carry the box, and I had one other thing I was going to ship with me, and I walk in and I say, okay, I need to ship this. And she's like, well, you need to get a box. I'm like, well, can you give me an idea of what kind of box I would need for this? You know, kind of a little awkward thing, a little Tupperware kind of big thing here. I don't know. I'm like, well, could you give me some idea? No. So the boxes are over there. Now, the shipping center is in this corner. The boxes are all the way, of course, in the opposite side of the store. So I go ahead and I walk to the opposite side of the store, and I'm looking at the boxes. And of course, none of the boxes are built, so you can't really tell the size. They're just flat cardboard. I grab one and say, it's got to be big enough. Go, I pay, I get the box. I go to the shipping center. I walk to the shipping center. I'm talking to the clerk, and there's this lady there, and she's got the tape gun. And she's taping something maybe slightly larger than this, like a shoebox size. Like this. Literally taking her 5 minutes to pack this box. And I asked the clerk, I said, do you have another tape gun? And he says, unfortunately, no. I'm like, okay. She finally finishes. I take the box, and I put it together, and I finally get the tape gun. I open, tape at the bottom of it, put it in there. And he says, well, you got a lot of room in there. You can cut the box down. I'm like, well, great. Do you have a pair of scissors? And so he asks around. There's a few other clerks there. And finally, someone brings over the scissors. You ready for this one? They hand me a bright yellow kitty safety scissor. That big. I'm like, do you not have any other scissors? And with a straight face, the clerk says to me, yeah, our other scissor broke last week. Thank you. It's Staples. I checked, by the way. They carry 514 different different scissors on their website. I'm like, okay, so maybe it's an inventory control issue. Can't someone pull $3 out of their pocket and buy a scissor off the shelf? Can't cut it with kitty scissors. Finally, the clerk sees how frustrated I'm getting, and he's like, okay, you know what? And he calls the shipping department, and they bring one of the box cutters from the shipping department. And they're watching me hawk-eyed while I cut the box so they can return it. By the way, this keeps going. And it gets worse and worse. Anyway, what's the difference in those two stories? What's the difference in the two stories? Now, keep in mind, Amazon, which obviously has dominated e-commerce to like ridiculous degrees, right? 30% of all e-commerce sales go through Amazon. And more importantly, the most important stat for you to keep in mind is that Prime members, when they come to the site, convert at 74%. 74%. If you're a Prime member, you go on the website, you're going to convert and buy something. What's the difference? Ease, that's part of it. What they've done and what they've understood is something that I got very lucky. When I was first into the business, I found a mentor, I found a book. His name is Roy Williams from Austin, Texas. And he wrote a book called The Wizard of Ad Trilogy. And what was so special about this guy is when De Beers wanted to figure out who was selling more diamonds than anyone else, they went to American Express and they analyzed the top 50 jewelers, and he was working with like 30 of them. And so they consulted to him. And this ad will give you a clue as to what the secret is. So let's see if we can get this video working without any crisis here. There we go. Now, we're in the Northeast, and I love speaking the Northeast. I do, because you guys are smarter. Tend to be. What's the secret?
You don't ever see the woman's face, so if you're a woman, you can interpret that yourself on that experience and sort of aspire to it.
You're partially there. So he was saying you don't see the woman's face, so you can kind of aspire to be that woman, right? So that's part of it. Anyone else know what it is? Anyone else? No one wants to take a guess. You got it. It's not about the company. They're never talking about their product. They're never talking about their company. They're talking about who? The buyer, the customer, and their journey. We all talk about storytelling and narratives, and we forget that the customer doesn't care about our story. It's irrelevant to them. Who's the only person that matters to your customer? The customer, their own lives. Our job as marketers is to understand their journey and help them become the hero of their journey. So here I am, I'm walking into Staples, and I want to ship a box. That's my journey. How hard would it have been to be someone at Staples says, look, if someone walks in and they need to ship this important package back to their loved one or to their business associate, what do we need to do to make their journey seamless that they love us? Instead, what do you think the chances are that I'll ever walk back into a Staples? If you close your eyes, you might see that. 0. And that's where the world has gone to. And Amazon understood this. Amazon understood it's all about experience, even to simple things as returns. And this is what's in their culture. And this is what we learned was the magic secret. The magic secret to all of our successful companies was that they learned how to tell stories about their customers from their customers' perspective. That was it. We first started dealing with personas and writing about personas in late 1990s, okay? This is not just about personas. There's more to it. We're going to get to it. But this is a key to this, right? Because what we all know is that today, right, a brand is not what we want to tell people that it's about. Whether you're a big brand or a small brand, it's irrelevant. It's what other customers and other people tell people that your brand is about. And if you make your customers heroes, what are they going to think about your brand? You rock. And that's what we're trying to get them to do. This is not hard. It could be. Let me show you how you can make it a little extra difficult. How many of you are fans of Airbnb? Okay, they've built an amazing brand. How did they do it? So my good friend Dennis G presented this at a conference. He was working at Airbnb at the time. And there's only one version of this presentation anywhere. It's on Fast Company. And it talks about their process. And it's very similar to the process we actually developed in 2006 in our book, Waiting for Your Cat to Bark, called Persuasion Architecture. And what the process does, and I'll show you the process, is it maps out this whole customer experience. And what they wanted to do is figure out how they're going to create a magical experience for both guests and hosts so that you talk about Airbnb. How many of you have seen Airbnb advertise? And when they advertise, what do they advertise? Not destinations, the customer stories. Right? How many of you saw the Berlin Wall one? That was actually developed by my friend Dennis G. Right? They tell the story of this 2 guys meeting at the Berlin Wall and then connecting through Airbnb. That's a great story. Now, I want you to watch this process because we're going to talk about it. And this is what our sponsor at Google saw and knew that we can do something like this. He said, but there's one problem. This process that they took months and months and months and months and lots of money and lots of time and lots of people. And that's a difficult thing to pull off today. How many of you have months and months to do things and plan? Right? We realized that was our problem. We needed something a little bit more agile. And that's what BuyerLegends is about. Let's look at this process and then we'll talk a little bit about BuyerLegends. Oh, wait.
I got this text message from Bryan one night, and it just said, Snow White, I'll tell you later.
I was like, Snow White? What?
Well, my first reaction was Snow White. It took a little explaining to start to see the parallels between Walt Disney and Snow White and us and the sharing economy.
Before our eyes, we have seen an entire industry grow, literally from the ground up.
When we started the storyboard process, we didn't know where it would lead. And I'm not sure we knew we were going to go all the way through with it. It was an experiment.
So it all started in the aircrew conference room, and we started just thinking about the entire journey, end to end, all the way through for the guest and the host.
And we're able to iterate that a number of times, honing in on the critical moments to describe the user experience.
Where are the moments that we're doing well? Where are the moments that we're not doing well?
As we worked on it more, it became clear that this actually is a way for us to kind of share with the company a framework that we can all contribute towards.
It was really important to get people with different perspectives involved, with different skill sets involved.
You don't often see all the stakeholders getting to participate so early in a process. A lot of putting the storyboards together was about taking different parts of information that we have, all the data we have from analytics and all the data that we have from customer support. The storyboard started with just a few words on Post-it notes. And every time we made it more real, we understood more about
the journey?
Well, initially I got brought in because Rebecca was looking for an illustrator for a project that I didn't really know anything about. I was referred to this guy, Nick, who works at Pixar, and I thought, let me reach out to him and see what he has to say.
I wasn't sure what it was at first. I was a little confused about, I guess, how storyboards would be applied.
She mentioned how much work there was, and it sounded like a lot.
Yeah.
Turns out it was about 5 times that much.
I absolutely love the Pixar artists. They're really cool. I think there's something that's really special about Airbnb, that we prioritize things that maybe don't make sense on the surface, but pay off down the road. I can't imagine how we would think or discuss frames without having the context of the Pixar artist.
I sat down with some rough sketches with Nick, and we started talking about like what's the message and what's the story and what's the feeling of this moment.
I'm really interested in people and the way they feel and character, and this is all about like inhabiting the like different roles.
And I think what they've done a really good job of is capture.
Hard to manage it. Sorry about that. But if you want to check it out, you can Google it, Fast Company, Snow White, and you'll find this video and you can see it in full thing. But essentially what they did is they got every stakeholder from boardroom to stockroom, and they planned out each moment of how customers were going to think and feel, right? And so imagine someone could have thought about, how would I feel if I had this package in my hand and I needed to go ship it? What would I need them to do? This is not hard to do. And so the same thing happened at Amazon, right? Someone said, okay, we have to return something. What would be something that would wow them in the experience? And how would we make them feel great? And they planned for that. And here's the trick. Here's what's happening in your company and almost every other company across the globe. A lot of those little micro moments where we can make someone feel amazing, we neglect. And different people in the company are making those decisions because we haven't mapped them out. I'm going to give you a perfect example of this. So here is an ad that a while ago for Geico, for the auto insurance company. So we found the banner, we found the landing page, and of course these are great, right? They're great scent between them. You can tell they're obviously related, similar copy, similar design. And you go in there and it tells you just to fill in your zip code. So what would you expect after you fill this out? Some kind of a quote, right? So all of a sudden you go ahead and you put in your zip code and you wind up on this page. Now we all know this is broken. So what happened? Who owned the ad and the landing page? Marketing. Who owned this? I like to call them the BPUs. Everyone knows what that stands for? Business Prevention Unit. Some of you may call it IT, I don't know, but some of you may call it legal. That's another department that does it. But this is completely broken, right? But what happened is because nobody said, hey, you know, after they fill in this quote and we told them it was easy, here's what they should see, here's what they should feel. Right? They know I was in Brooklyn at the time. They could have gone auto-populated, given me some samples of how many people in this zip code are saved. There's so many things they could have done to improve this experience to make me keep going, but instead, this is broken, and I'm gone. And this happens over and over and over again. This happens in your content. This happens when people are looking to get answers for questions that are so obvious that we miss it because we didn't plan for it. So the secret that we've learned over these 2 decades is brands are changing. The best brands, the most successful brands today have 3 things in common. They're customer-centric. They're deadly focused in on making sure they have great customer experiences. They're driven by data, but not the way you think. And then lastly, and this was the one that surprised us, is that they're managed by narrative. Even Amazon, which is one of the world's greatest data-driven brands, we all know how well they use data. You can't go into a meeting with Jeff Bezos with a PowerPoint with data points on there. He won't tolerate it. What you need to do is prepare a 5 to 6 page narrative, and before the meeting, everybody sits there and reads it, because we don't know what's important and what's not. Right? Because it would have been very clear for Geico to say, hey, this next screen is going to be really important for us to get that conversion. If we don't have it synced up with the ad campaign, it's not going to work. But someone didn't articulate it, and they missed it. So let's talk about this narrative part, because I think this is the critical part. In 1994, when Amazon first wanted to start, Jeff Bezos wanted to start Amazon, he had this quote that said he wanted to be Earth's most customer-centric company. Now, have any of you ever met Jeff Bezos or watched videos of him? How many of you think he's a warm, fuzzy, caring guy? He's not, right? That's not his personality. So what does he mean by Earth's most customer-centric company? Very simple. He understood one thing that digital provides that no other medium ever did. It provides data about everything your customer wants, does, wishes, shares, emails. You get it? And he could take all that data to provide you better experience and make it smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter. That's what's made them so successful. Even in their meetings, they have a chair that represents their customers, right? And in every department, they think this way. And they have a narrative about their brand. We are going to be the greatest selection. We're going to have 5 to 7 times the amount of products of any of our competitors. We're going to be priced very competitively, somewhere between 5 and 12% cheaper than most of our competitors, to the fact that they change their prices over 6 million times a day. It's crazy. They're going to be more, get products to you faster than everywhere else, right? It's very convenient, right? Those are some of the metrics. 90+% of their products ship from zone 1 or less, right? In Austin, I can get products within an hour in thunderstorms. It's crazy. And then they're focusing on customer centricity. This is what their managers manage by. The same things that align with their brand, those metrics, that's what drives the product managers. That's what he talks about, inputs and outputs. He never worries about stock price. He doesn't worry about conversion rates. As my good friend Avinash Kaushik would tell you, Google's not worried about whether you're buying on this one or not. They're doing these faith-based initiatives. That's because they know if they put in enough into the customer and caring about your story and your success, eventually we'll get paid. That's a great narrative. That's obsessed about the customer. Because we don't care as a customer where in the organization you sit, what silo, who we're talking to. All we care about is having a great customer experience. And while most organizations will say, yes, we're truly customer-centric, when Bain did a study and they asked executives if your company's customer-centric, 80% of executives said, yeah, we're customer-centric. But when they asked those same exact customers, only 8% of those customers said that company was customer-centric. This is the big disconnect. So how do we get there? We know that companies that invest in customer centricity outperform every other type of organization out there. Top performers. It's worth the investment. And it was in Jeff Bezos' Everything Store, the autobiography about him. There's one line in there that really was the shift in perspective that helped so many companies. So he's having this battle with the publishers whether they should include reviews or not. And he tells the publisher, no, you got this wrong. He said, Amazon's not in the business of selling books. We're in the business of helping customers buy books. And think about that subtle perspective. Very simple. But that's our job. Whether you're in content marketing, any kind of inbound marketing, our job is to help our customers buy. Period. Stop selling. The selling will happen. Develop the audience, develop the trust. Get obsessed over helping them buy. And I promise you, the sales will come. It may not be as immediate, but the success will be there. I'm going to actually skip this video. But I want to tell you the story, and this is another great example. How many of you here own an Apple product? Okay. This video is a video of Steve Jobs.
To me, marketing is about values. This is a very complicated world. It's a very noisy world. And we're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us. No company is. And so we have to be really clear on what we want them to know about us. To do that is not to talk about speeds and feeds. It's not to talk about MIPS and megahertz. It's not to talk about why we're better than Windows. The dairy industry tried for 20 years to convince you that milk was good for you. It's a lie, but they tried anyway. And the sales were going like this. And then they tried Got Milk, and the sales are going like this. Got Milk doesn't even talk about the product. Matter of fact, it focuses on the absence of the product. But the best example of all, and one of the greatest jobs of marketing the universe has ever seen is Nike. Remember, Nike sells a commodity. They sell shoes. And yet, when you think of Nike, you feel something different than a shoe company. In their ads, as you know, they don't ever talk about the product. They don't ever tell you about their air soles and why they're better than Reebok's air soles. What does Nike do in their advertising? They honor great athletes and they honor great athletics. That's who they are. That's what they are about.
I'm going to end there. What is it you're about? What is it you're about? Who are you going to make a hero? If you've ever looked at any Apple ad, it's never about the products. It's how people take pictures. It's how people create music. This is what 1997 when he launched the campaign, The Crazy Ones. And this is how Apple became the highest market cap company in the world. This is a process. I don't care whether you're Amazon or Apple or Google or whether you're my friend Bobby in Austin who own one of the premier baseball training facilities up here in Nashua. This is applicable to everyone. If you want to be a successful brand over the next decade, this is what you have to do. This is a process to us. The process that we've been doing in digital has been wrong for the last 20 years. You know why Amazon dominates almost every single product search online? It's very simple. They started it backwards. They built great product pages with a lot of reviews, a lot of information to help you buy the product. Then they built the ads and the keywords. It's not the other way around. We all think about this the wrong way. Think about solving the problems. We've got to fix this process. And while this process I'm going to show you today is actually fairly simple, anybody can do it, but you'll get better at it as you go along. Okay? And it's a very, very, very simple process. Don't mistake the simplicity for how powerful it is. Anybody here ever see the movie Hero, Dreams of Sushi? Great movie. And in the movie, the hero, who's this, multiple Michelin award-winning sushi chef, has this guy who's being an apprentice with him. And this guy's been making sushi for like 15 years. And he has him go make the sushi rice 200 times. And every time he takes the rice and he throws it away. He says something as simple as sushi rice, but it has to be perfect to get that right consistency. But it's a mastery. It's a process. And that's what we're trying to get to. You know what? The first time you make it, it was probably pretty good. We all would have been like, wow, right? But until he got to that perfection point, and that's why he only's got like 8 chairs in his restaurant. But for him, that's important for his brand, to get it exactly right. Your process, you'll get better with this as you go along. And here is what it is. This process, and Paul Jasinski, who's the one who asked us to come up with this, is what will help you align product management, IT, design, marketing, the whole team together. Everyone from boardroom to stockroom to understand this narrative. And it's critical to understand it from your customer's point of view. Like I said, Jeff Bezos, this is what he does in all his meetings, these narratives. You build these stories, okay, not just fictional stories about how your customer might buy from you or learn from you, because that doesn't do enough. You need to tie it back to the analytics. That's when you start getting the magic, and I'm going to talk about how you do that in a moment. Okay. So what are buyer legends? Buyer legends are a very simple process. They'll do 4 things for you. It's going to improve your communications because you're going to be telling these stories. It's going to improve execution because everybody's going to be on the same page. It's going to improve your testing because everyone's going to have more ideas about what to do around the narrative and how to execute on it. And ultimately, it's going to help you make more money. Now, the reason the stories are so important is because as humans, to have empathy for our customers, it's actually fairly difficult when we look at data all day long. And so even movies like WALL-E, right? How many of you loved those characters? They never said a word, but we connected with them. We bonded with them because there was a story behind it. And that's what we need to do to develop that customer centricity. Now, I don't care how you want to develop your personas. There are multiple models. There are multiple ways to do this. It's irrelevant. All I want you to do is take a different perspective than what you currently have. Okay? Simple, complex, we've done them all. It doesn't matter. Just changing perspective, telling the story from anything will get you a lift from where you are. And remember, as human beings, that fundamentally is what motivates us and has changed us, is our ability to tell stories. No other species can do that. And so we need to leverage this because digital marketing has been killed. And now, keep in mind, I was the founder of the Digital Analytics Association. I love analytics. But analytics is killing digital. We're so worried about the outcomes, how many clicks, likes, shares, that we forget that one piece of content may be the one piece of content that 3, 4, 5 people see, but makes all the difference in whether they bought or not. And the problem is when we look at the data, the parts of our brain that connect to empathy shut off. Stop worrying about all the data. It's important. I will tell you where it's important. But balance it with understanding the customer journey. This is critical. So how do we perform a buyer legend? It's actually fairly simple. First, select that perspective. Whatever that persona is, whatever that perspective is, doesn't matter. Start with that one person. And we're going to build a story around them. The first thing I want you to do, and you can do this either on a macro scale or on one single campaign scale, it doesn't matter, whatever you feel comfortable with. The second step is to perform what we call a pre-mortem. How many of you have ever seen CSI? Right? Where they look at the crime scene, they're trying to figure out, okay, what happened in here? They're trying to create all the story, and it's a post-mortem. This is a pre-mortem. Before the crime happens of them not converting, what are all the possibilities of everything that could go wrong, right? That'll prevent them from buying from you. What are all the questions that they may have that you haven't answered yet? Get them out there. Get that list. I promise you, it's much larger than you think. Then what I want you to do is outline the story of how they actually bought from you, but from the successful point backwards until how they found you. And this is really important. So if you've ever done any empathy mapping or anything like that, everyone wants to tell the story going forward. And this is the biggest change that we did that fundamentally changed all companies when we built this process. It's what made it agile. And the reason being is because when we want to tell a story going forward, we make assumptions about how they got from point A to point B. So that's what happened in Geico's example, right? I see the ad, I go to the landing page, and I go through the checkout process. And no one worried about, oh, well, how did they get there? What did they see? They missed that. But if you did it backwards, you would know what they would need the step beforehand in order to get there. And then you would have seen, oh, there's going to be a disconnect. And then you write your narrative. You don't have to be a great writer. It doesn't matter. You can get better and better. There's all kinds of great storytelling techniques you can add to it. And then you go and you execute. And then you use data to improve what you built on. That's it. Simple model. And it's a recipe, right? Just the same way, and this is funny because, I'm a former New Yorker, came here to visit, loved it. I live in Austin, Texas. Now, all breads, all pastas, they're made with these ingredients, correct? Flour, salt, water. And you would think that if you give anybody some bread, salt, and water, that you can create something decent. But you know, in New York, you got their bagels. Here, you've got some amazing pasta. Somehow in Austin, don't eat bread or pasta. It's awful, okay? Now, it doesn't matter how good or bad this is. Like I said, it's a recipe. Work with it, you will get better and better every single time. And that's what we saw. Whether it was this one guy who owned a small nutritional company that ran his buyer legend, and within 3 weeks of writing his buyer legend, he increased his conversion rate by 46%, giving him millions of dollars of revenue, to whether you're Google and you get multiple, lots of digits optimization. This recipe is simple. And here's what you have to have when you finish the product to make sure that it's the ideal recipe. So you have to have your personas. You've got to understand their purpose. What is their objective? What do they want to accomplish? If you don't understand their goals, you'll never get to achieve your goals. You've got to understand their goals. What's their rationale? How are they approaching it? How are they going to make decisions? What's going to motivate them? Right? What are the key decision points along the way? You want to make sure to highlight those, right? That's what we saw in the Airbnb thing, which is kind of out of sync. Then you need to do your pre-mortem, okay, which is obviously getting the story of all the things that could go wrong. Make sure you have all those pieces in there, plan for them. Create some drama. Drama is important because drama is the parts where you know you need to overemphasize to make sure the experience is over the top. Do the reverse chronology. Think about all the constraints and considerations, how you can overcome them. Figure out all the possible alternatives that they could buy or not buy from you, all your competitors, whatever it is. Add those in there. It's got to be in there. It's important. And then lastly, look for those pieces in the story that you can measure. Come back into it and say, oh, here's things that we would know, whether it's by quantifiable or quantitative measurements or qualitative measurements. Here are some of the things that we would know whether we're doing a good job or not. That's going to align with their story. That data is going to feed you much smarter than worrying whether you've got clicks or likes. You get that? This is the critical part to it. This is not hard. Now, if you want to get fancy after you write your narrative, go ahead and get a designer in, create little mock-ups, little storyboards. They're great. These visuals help everyone really get to it, because obviously we're very visual as well, and having the visual to the story is a great way to kind of put this all together. Because now you can go ahead and you can do a design. Now, once you've planned this whole experience, now I'm going to teach you the secret, magic secret. So I started today with 2 stories. Staples, the negative story, and Amazon. And they got me to tell their story. How many of you want your customers to tell your story? Okay. There are simple triggers to word of mouth that we all need to know. If you've got your story planned out, now you can say, here is an opportunity for us to shine, to get them to talk about us. You really can architect it. There are 4 general ways to architect word of mouth, literally. The first one is architectural, right? So in the physical sense, right, you think about a building that's so different than everything else. You all have one probably in your city of a landmark building everyone talks about, right? Everyone here can talk about Fenway and the Green Monster, right? That's something everybody wants to talk about. Online, how many of you remember an app that everybody talks about? What app am I talking about? Tinder. I didn't have to say a word, right? Just swipe left, swipe. We all know it. Airbnb, right? Uber, right? They've all built things into their apps, small things that get us talking about the experience. Everyone get that? Okay. The second one is kinetic. It's the performance of it. If you've ever been to Seattle, to Pike's Market, and they're throwing fish, everybody's talking about the show. Or how many of you have ever gone to a restaurant and ordered something flambé that's tableside? Right? That's part of the show that they're putting on that gets people to talk about it, right? More people will talk about your bananas Foster and take pictures of it and share it than they will about any other dish. There's a reason for that. Online, again, show them great performance, fast times, easy usability. People will rave about you. That's how Google built their brand, right? They were more relevant than every other search engine before everyone else came out. That simple. The third one, get generous. Be over the top. Give amazing content, way better than anyone else can do. People will talk about you, I promise you. How many of you are fans of blogs like Moz? And I mean, you think in HubSpot, the amount of content, the amount of education that they give you, you talk about them. They've built a reputation of being overly generous. And then the last one, which is so critical, and I know I'm going to appeal to somebody here in the second row, is a self of identity. I had to be careful what team was in there, by the way. I was not going to put Yankees in there, Red Sox. But Mets, right? People can associate with being from Harvard. Right? What's their identity? How can you include them in your club? How can you make them part of this velvet rope community? Right? How can you make them feel special? These are all things that trigger word of mouth. And if you can find opportunities to add that into this story, you're going to kick it up a notch. Promise you. Now, I've given you this whole process, and it looks like, yeah, to do this and to do this on my whole site, this would be a lot of work. And it is. If you had to fix everything, it's a lot of work. But just like this elephant here, and if I asked you, how would you eat it, it's the same answer how you do buyer legends. Anyone know how you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Take one campaign, take one blog post, and really answer the questions. Go through the process and do it. And it will totally change your perspective. You will start seeing the outcomes from this. This is not hard. The first time you do it, it's going to feel a little rusty, but you're going to go better and better. And so this week I was in town, and I brought my son with me because I wanted him to spend some time with my friend Bobby, who's a hitting coach here. And he got to go to Fenway and got to the top of Green Monster and see some of the players. And one of the things that Bobby did with him is he worked with him on his grip on batting. And by the end of the day, he had this nasty blister. Okay, it's probably even scarred up right now. And it's like, you actually did something different today because it hurt. The one sign of really knowing that it's different and you're going to get different results is that it might hurt a little bit. It's awkward. He was holding it differently than ever beforehand, but it gave him so much more power than he ever had before. This is the same thing that you're going to have. By using this process, you're going to have more power to tell better stories about your customers. They're going to engage with you. They're going to share things with their community. And all of a sudden, you're going to start seeing better results. By the way, if you're interested in the book, as agile as the process is, so is the book. It's 46 pages on a Kindle. It's a whole $2.99. If you're patient, we'll probably make it free sometime next month. It doesn't matter to us about selling books or not selling books. What I'm telling you is 20 years of doing this, this process is what differentiates the best brands from the worst. And if you want to become successful, adopt it. It's out there. Go to Buyer Legends blog, tons more articles, tons more detail on how to do it. We want everybody to do this. Please. Thank you very much.